9.Borobudur book is not a temple. Section 9. Santo Saba works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on subjective academic studies and studies, this needs to be re-examined by experts in their fields. In an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. INDONÄSIARYÄ. By Santo Saba. Exploration and Research. Complete info. WhatsApp to +62813 2132 9787. Borobudur is the original temple of the archipelago, not based on teachings from outside. Let's follow the author's explanation about Hinduism in India. To clarify more about Hinduism, we will start from the pre-Hindu teachings, namely the pre-Vedic teachings. First, we look at the year which marks its grouping and development. Hindu teaching timeline. 1. Indus River Valley Civilization, 3300-1400 BC. 2. Pre-Vedic religions prehistory 1750 BC. 3. Ancient Vedic religion, 1750-500 BC. 4. The early Vedic period, 1750-1200 BC. 5. The Vedic period, 1600-500 BC. 6. The Preclassical period, 1000 BC 100 AD. 7. The Late Vedic period, from 850 BC. 8. Classical period, 800 to 200 BC. 9. Ascetic Reformism, 500 to 200 BC. 10. The Epic and Puranic period, 500 BC 500 AD. 11. Classical Hinduism, 200 BC 1100 AD. 12. Preclassical Hinduism, 200 BC 300 AD. 13. The Empire of Gupta, 320-650 AD. 14. Late Classical Hinduism, AD 650-1100. 15. Mid and Late Puranic periods, 500-1500 AD. 16. Hindu-Islamic civilization, 1000-1750 AD. 17. Muslim conquest and the rise of sects of Hinduism, 1100-1850 AD. 18. Modern century, 1500 present. 19. Modern Hinduism, since 1850. From the grouping and year, we can conclude that the belief or view of religion in India is divided into several parts, namely: 1. The Indus River Valley Civilization period, 3300-1400 BC. 2. Pre-Veda prehistory 1750 BC. 3. The Vedic period, 1600-500 BC. 4. Hindu civilization, 650-1750 AD. In the range before 5000 BC, civilization in Tanasunda land experienced its heyday and until the teachings of the ancestors of the archipelago to civilizations on the Indian mainland around the Indus River. This civilization is known as the Harapa Civilization, with the center of the Mohenjo-Daro government, which later happened a war where the Sundanese land civilization attacked it. This all-powerful war incident was recorded in the story. Ramayana was recorded with the number 5000 BC. Indus River Valley Civilization. The Indus River Valley Civilization or Harappan Civilization occurred around 3300 BC, and the earliest stages occurred before 4000 BC. The civilization was centered on the area around the Indus River, mostly Pakistan, and a small part of Afghanistan, Iran, and India, stretching east to the valley of the Ghaggar-Hakra River and reaching up to the Ganges-Yamuna prayer. This civilization stretched to the west to the coast of Makran in Baluchistan, north to southeastern Afghanistan and south to Damabad in Maharashtra. In this civilization, several large cities developed, including Harappa 3300 BC, Dholavira 2900 BC, Mohenjo-Daro 2500 BC, Lothal 2400 BC, and Rakhigarhi, as well as more than 1000 small towns and villages. Cities at the time of civilization were known for their brick-built architecture, roadside drainage systems, and multi-story housing. The Indus Valley Civilization, 3300-1700 BC, 2600-1900 BC, was an ancient river civilization that flourished in the Indus River basin in ancient India, now Pakistan and northwest India. This civilization is also known as the Harappan Civilization. Indus culture developed over the centuries, then experienced a revival around 3000 BC. This civilization spanned territory that is now occupied by Pakistan and North India, but suddenly experienced a decline around 1900 BC. The settlements of the Indus civilization spread as far as the Arabian Sea coast in Gujarat in the south, the Iranian border in the west, and the border town of Bactria. Among the settlements, the main urban centers were at Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, as well as Lothal. The teachings of the archipelago's ancestors were the basis for the formation of Hinduism during the time when the teachings were not yet called and Veda was not formed, namely the Pre-Veda period, prehistory 1750 BC. More complete information about the pre-Veda teachings as follows. The first human race to occupy India, 40,000–60,000 years ago, during the Paleolithic period, were Australoids that may have had a relationship with the indigenous peoples of Australia. That is, when the land on the Earth's surface was inhabited by humans and non-humans, namely the Great Land of Sunda land and the Sahul land, early civilizations Sunda land as the ancestral civilization of the archipelago. The oldest prehistoric religion in India, which may have left its mark on Hinduism, dates back to the Mesolithic and Neolithic times, and there is also an assumption of immigrant teachings. Several tribal religions in India have survived, predating the dominance of Hinduism. According to the anthropologist Gregory Possehl, the Indus River Valley Civilization, 2600–1900 BC, contained a logical, or perhaps arbitrary, starting point for some aspects of the later Hindu tradition. Religion at that time contained the worship of the Almighty God, which some scholars, especially John Marshall, compared as Proto-Shiva, and perhaps the figure of Mother Goddess, underlying the figure of Sakti. Other practices from the Indus River Valley civilization that continued into the Vedic period included worship of water and fire. However, the relationship between the gods and religious practices of the Indus River Valley and contemporary Hinduism has been the subject of political disputes and scholarly debate. So there are original teachings that are in the Indus River, namely the Harappa Civilization and the teachings of migrants which underlie the formation of Vedic teachings. Namely the basic teachings or philosophy of the Sakti figure of a mother goddess and the teachings of worshipping water and fire. These teachings are the original teachings and philosophy of the archipelago's ancestors. Diwa Baruna, water, and Diwa Agni, fire, which essentially refers to the sun as the center and its Pulsafa. The sun-wise religion. Western scholars view Hinduism as a fusion or synthesis of various traditions and cultures in India, with diverse origins and no founding figure. Its roots include Brahmanism, ancient Vedic religion, religions of the Indus River Valley civilization, and popular local traditions. The word Sindhu is first mentioned in the Rigveda. The Elamo-Dravidians are referred to by this name to distinguish it from the present-day Dravidians who occupied India, who are dominated by descendants of the Australoid race. According to Jones and Ryan, some Hinduism practices must have originated in the Neolithic era, 4000 BC. For example, the worship of certain plants and animals because they are considered sacred is likely to have existed since ancient times. Satu is the worship of goddesses, a part of Hinduism. The present, perhaps a feature that has existed since Neolithic times. Quote, no definite year is possible as the beginning of the Vedic period. Witzel mentions a time period between 1900 and 1400 BC. Flood mentions 1500 BC. According to T. Oberles, the period 1700–1100 BC is determined based on cumulative evidence. Brahmin-Aryan here is Brahmanism and the culture of the Aryan nation. Aryan nation is the ancestor of the ancient Indonesian archipelago. Of the 12 books made by Santo Saba in an effort to restore the historical records of our lost ancestors. There are 26,000 ancient manuscripts belonging to Indonesia transported to Leiden, Netherlands. If they are stretched, they can reach 12 kilometers in length. The National Library itself only collects 10.3 thousand ancient manuscripts. Less than half of them, the records of our ancestors, are possible to be interpreted as subjective, according to Dutch, and then published here or not in accordance with the facts. Pay attention to the number of years. Saka, written on Prasati, is not the number of the Saka year which began in 78 AD. It is the Indian version of the Saka calendar which began when King Salivahana India was conquered by the nation, the Kakya, the ancestors of the Indonesian archipelago in that year. Textual and intertextual studies of Mudraraksasa history, it is generally believed that the Saka era began in 78 AD. A critical and comprehensive study of epigraphic and literary references from the Saka era seems to lead us to the conclusion that the Saka era and the Sakanta era are not identical. The Saka era began in 583 BC while the Sakanta era began in 78 AD. The chronological history of ancient India has been proposed since 661 years as these two different epochs are mistakenly assumed to be identical. Based on literacy studies on the epoch of Saka era, it is explained that Sakas equals Scythians. Mentioning that there were many migrations from Sakas Bactria and Gandhara to Eastern Europe and northern Anatolia through the Pontic steppe since the Vedic era. After the Mahabharata War 3162 BC, many large Scythian groups who migrated to Central Asia, Eastern Europe and northern Anatolia around 3100 to 3000 BC. The Hittites and Mitannis in Anatolia were none other than Scythians Kakya, Saka who migrated through India, which was characterized by the mention of Vedic deities such as Mithra, Indra, Varuna, Nasatya. Even these groups of Scythians who migrated to introduce Lord Mithra or the sun in West after 3000 BC, it has developed into the religion of Mithraism after 2000 BC. The previous Shakas were people from the Shakadvipa region of the Shaka Purana text, the Scythian Kakya, Saka peoples as Western historians info from Ptolemy around 140 AD, which proves the existence of Indo-Scythians in southwest India of the Pataline and Sarastrean regions, Saurashtra. The source of the 10th century Kavyamimamsa, the name of the area mentioned in the Kavyamimamsa is the Rajasekara region. This is the Astakasthan, where the Saka first stopped and settled after coming to India. Sakala or Sialkot is thought to be located in Lahore in Punjab, identified with Saka from Rajasekara. Sakala was the first capital made by the Greek king Demetrius. Sakala was destroyed when Hayuan the Song was on his way to India. So it is possible that before the time of the Song sharks some kings had attacked Saka and destroyed their capital at Sakala. According to sources, Nilamadapurana, namely the chronology of ancient Gandharan and Bactria. Saka is the name of a tribe called inhabiting the area around the ancient Kasmira, Kashmir Valley, region in Oxus. Then Saka moved south and occupied Kipin, Kapisa Kafiristan, spreading and forming various kingdoms including Hosein and Sian II, Sind, south of Kasmira. This region for some time being ruled by Demetrius. Ptolemy mentions Casperia in the Menander region. The source of a cultural and historical literary study of the Nilamada Purana, called Saka is the name of the tribe mentioned in the Gupta inscription, the 3rd century AD Gupta kingdom founded by Sri Gupta, covering part of ancient India, and they embraced the Dharmic religion. Like Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism, these tribes migrated to places other than their original settlements and gave their new territory the name Janapadas, which they lived in, replacing the old Vedic tribes of Punjab and Rajasthan. Source of analysis on the Gupta inscription. Mentioned, Saka is named since the era of King Salivahana from 78 AD. The word Salivahana comes from Satavahana's. The line of kings of this dynasty is said to have ruled in northwestern Mysore under the common name Satakarni. The successor is Mysore, recorded in 1717 after Salivahana. The origins of religion in India began with the entry of the Aryan Kakya, Saka nation, which brought enormous changes in the life order of Indian society from 3102 BC to 1300 BC. That the Aryans were not the first inhabitants of India and the Harappan, Dravidian, civilization existed long before their arrival. This means that the Aryan or Vedic culture was not the sole source of early civilization in India, that the source came from somewhere else. The initial presumption of the Aryan people published today is that those who lived in Iran and Iraq in the prehistoric era, these people migrated to northern India around 1500 BC. These indigenous, Dravidian, India called the newcomers, Arya. In the late 19th century, early 20th century, Aryan was equated with the Germanic or Nordic people, and prior to this the presumption, Aryan, refers to an ancient language whose speakers are thought to have spread and influenced languages throughout the Indian subcontinent. This change occurred because the Aryans carried out cultural integration with the native Indian nation, Dravida, and then this integration gave birth to three Indian religions, the Aryan nation after it started writing the Vedic scriptures. This holy book was written in four parts such as Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, and Atharva Veda. The German nation took the symbol, swastika, from a more advanced nation in the past. That nation is the Kakya, Sakya, Shitya, Aryan people with the symbol, swastika, won the nation's prowess, and this symbol is what inspired Hitler. Our ancestors, the Indonesian archipelago, adhered to the Dharmic original teachings that existed long before the 5th century BC, which is now perfectly preserved in Bali. This is what historical recorders call the Kakya, Sakya, Shitya, Arya people. These people who in their descent still use the sun as a symbol and the logo for the swastika symbol used in their daily culture, are perfectly preserved in Bali, clearly marked by chanting God with a Cynthia. He who cannot be imagined. The unthinkable. Ida sang Hyang Widi Wasa. Not Krishna. So, Saka is the name of a nation who came to India and expanded to migrate to Central Asia, Eastern Europe and North Anatolia in the post-Mahabharata War, 3162 BC, around 3100-3000 BC. Europeans call the Saka with Scythian. This is what is meant by Arya. The literacy of the word Arya is recorded in the opening sentence of the Kalasan inscription. Namo Bhagavatyai Arya Tara Yai. Iri Nalanda Mahaviharya Arya Bhiksusamgasya. The text of this sentence is written in Nalanda Bihar, India on a stupa named Saraputra. Aryan is the ancestor of the Indonesian archipelago. The former name, Saraputra, was the son of the archipelago, a pioneer figure for the birth of one of the Indian teachings which is now label. In Borobudur, he was born from a mother named Sari, in Svarnabhumi, Svarnadvipa, Nusantara, Indonesia before the 5th century BC. These, Saka, were the ones who conquered King Salivahana in 78 AD. In the Indonesian archipelago, there are scattered inscriptions with the year, Saka. In the figure of the bas-relief of Borobudur, which is closed on panel number 43, a building is depicted in the form of a typical archipelago roof. The inscription on the edge of the frame reads, Mahetsakya. The word, Mahachakya, means great power, or people who have great power. Kakya, or Kaka, Saka. These are our ancestors in the archipelago, scattered hundreds of inscriptions dating from Kaka, Saka. In the dictionary, the Petersburg Dictionary, Otto Boetlink and Rudolf Roth, 1879-1889, and St. Petersburg Great Street Dictionary 1855-1875, is called Maheshakya, Mahendranagari, Mahendrayajan, Maheshabandhu. The words which have a similar meaning to Maheshakya, either from Sanskrit or from German, are a great man. Harvard Kyoto transliterated the text of the word Mahetsakya to Mahesakya. In Veldu is the word Mahe. Transcription was affixed Sakya. The modern ITrans version is Maheshakya, Mayasakya, in IPA font, Mek. The word Mahe means great, or a great nation, and the word Sakya is the ancestor of the Indonesian archipelago. The inscription with the number of Saka years proves that the Devanagari version of the Saka Kakya country is written in IAST transliteration with a diacritic sign. This word is written Mahesakya. Maheshakya, Mahesakya, a man of great manliness, in the Sanskrit word with the translation of being a noble and noble man. The great wise man was the leader of the nation in the advanced civilization of the former Indonesian archipelago, the Kaka, the great Kaka nation, Mahetsakya. The number of years, Saka, written on the inscription is not the number of the Saka year which began in 78 AD. It is the Indian version of the Saka calendar which began when King Salivahana India was conquered by the people of Kakya, the ancestors of the Indonesian archipelago in that year. The calculation method earlier this year which caused the historical record of the ancestors of the archipelago to become lost. Hindu India. No definite year is possible as the beginning of the Vedic period. Witzel puts a time span between 1900 and 1400 BC. Flood mentions 1500 BC. This synthesis arose around 500 to 200 BC, and grew alongside Buddhism until the 8th century. From North India, Hindu synthesis spread south to parts of Southeast Asia. The Vedic period which lasts from 1750 to 500 BC, is so called because it is based in the Vedic-based religion of the Indo-Aryans, who migrated to southwest India after the decline of the Indus River Valley civilization, possibly from the Central Asian steppes. Their language and religion. Their religion further developed when they migrated to the plains of North India after 1100 BC and became pastoralists. Although the beliefs and practices of the period of pre-classical Hinduism may have originated from the, still hypothetical, Proto-Indo-European religious material, the literature underlying the tradition at that time was the Vedic Samhita, hence the name for this period. The oldest book among the Vedic literature is the Rigveda, which is thought to have been composed in the period 1700–1100 BC. Schools, and movements. Hinduism does not rely on authority based on central doctrines such as creeds, pillars of faith, or creed. Although Hindu traditions are not uniform, many Hindus do not want to recognize themselves as adherents to a particular Hindu sect or sect. Generally, schools are differentiated based on the deity worshipped as a manifestation of the Almighty, as well as on the traditions regarding the way of worshipping that deity. There are four main schools that are often observed: Vaishnava, Siwa, Sakta, and Smarta. The Vaishnava people worship Vishnu as the manifestation of the Almighty. The Siwa people worship Shiva as the manifestation of the Almighty. Saktas worship Sakti, strength, or goddess who is personified as divine woman. Whereas Smarta believed in the fundamental unity of the five Pankadeva, or six Shanmata, gods as the personification of the Almighty. Other traditions such as Ganapatya, worship of Ganesha, and Sora, worship of Surya, were less widespread. Siwa Teachings. Siwa people worship Shiva as a manifestation of the Almighty. This teaching is what the author believes in the teachings that were brought from the archipelago and survived in Indian soil during the pre-Veda era, which later grew to underlie the teachings now called Hinduism in India. A number of religious movements are categorized into one of the major schools of Hinduism. For example, the Hare Krishna movement is categorized into the Vaishnava group. There are also Hindu religious movements that are difficult to determine to be included in the aforementioned groups. For example, Arya Samaj, which was initiated by Swami Dayananda Saraswati. This religious movement is different from the Hindu tradition in general, which is that it does not worship God by means of statues or paintings. This movement focuses on the Vedas and Yajna, religious rites based in the Vedas. The four main schools of Hindu India. The four main schools that are frequently encountered are Vaishnava, Saiva, Sakta, and Smarta. Within each sect, there are several schools or other schools that go their own way. 1. Vaishnava. A sect within Hinduism that worships Vishnu, the god of preservation according to the concept of Trimurti, Trinity, and its 10 manifestations Avatara. This school emphasizes worship, and its followers also worship various gods, including Rama and Krishna, who are believed to be the embodiment of Vishnu. Followers of this school are usually non-ascetic, monastic, following the monastic way of life, and pursue the practice of meditation and chanting devotional songs. Usually, the Vaishnava people are dualistic. This school has many holy figures, temples, and holy books. This flow is divided into several groups, namely, Sri Sampradaya, Vaishnava, who worships Lakshmi as Vishnu's spouse; Brahma Sampradaya, Vaishnava, who worships Vishnu exclusively; Rudra Sampradaya, Vaishnava, who worships Vishnu or Avatara, such as Krishna, Rama, Balarama, and others; Kumara Sampradaya, Vaishnava, who worships Kadarkamara. 2. Saiva. The flow in the body of Hinduism that worships Shiva. Sometimes Shiva is described as a creepy Bhairava. Saivas are more interested in asceticism than other Hindus, and are common to be found wandering around India with ashes smeared on their faces and performing ritual self-purification. They prayed in temples and practiced yoga, struggling to become one with Shiva. This flow is what the author believes in the teachings brought from the land of the archipelago, and still has a little bit of adjustment due to changes due to its development in the land of India. Reflecting on the Saiva community emphasizes more on ascetic contemplation processions. This appears in the form of ascetic statues or samadhi at Borobudur temple. Bhairava, the form of pronunciation by the Javanese, is identical to Borosroo, a spooky creature. Austerity. Some Hindus choose to live as ascetics, sannyasa, in an effort to attain moksha, or other forms of spiritual perfection. Ascetics are committed to a simple life, not having sex, not seeking worldly treasures, and contemplating God. Hindu ascetics are called sannyasin, sadhu, or swami, while women are called sannyasini. Some ascetics live in holy places or dormitories, while others wander from place to place believing that only God can fulfill their desires. This school is divided into several groups, namely, Pasupada Saiwa, who emphasizes Tapa Brata, mainly spread in Gujarat, Kashmir, and Nepal, Siwa Siddhanta, Siwa who is influenced by Tantra, Kashmira Siwadarshana, Siwa who is monistic and idealistic, Natha Siddha Siddhanta, monistic Siwa, Lingayata, monotheistic Siwa, Siwa Advaita, monistic and theistic Siwa. 3. Sakta. Hinduism that worships Sakti or goddess. Followers of Saktism believe in Sakti as a force that underlies the principles of masculinity, which is personified as a pair of gods. Sakti is believed to have various forms. Some of them looked friendly, such as Parvati, Shiva's partner, or Lakshmi, Vishnu's partner. Others look scary, like Kali or Durga. Sakta is closely related to Tantric Hinduism, which teaches rituals and practices for the purification of the mind and body. The Sakta community uses mantras, magic, sacred images, yoga, and ceremonies to summon cosmic powers. This school contains two main groups, namely, Srikula worship of the goddesses with the title Shri, and Kalikula worship of manifestation goddesses. Time. 4. Smarta. A Hindu monistic school that worships more than one god, including Shiva, Vishnu, Sakti, Ganesha, and Surya among other gods and goddesses, but considers that these deities are manifestations of the one supreme being. Compared to the three schools of Hinduism mentioned above, Smarta is relatively young. Unlike Vaishnava or Saiva, this school is not strictly sectarian, and is based in the faith that Brahman is the supreme principle in the universe and permeates everything that exists. Generally, Smarta worshippers worship the Almighty in 6 personifications: Ganesha, Shiva, Sakti, Vishnu, Surya, and Skanda. Because the Smarta community accepted the existence of the main Hindu deities, they were known as liberals or non-sectarians. They follow philosophical and meditative practices, and emphasize unity between the individual and God through awareness. Vedic literature focuses on worshipping gods such as Indra, Varuna, and Agni, as well as performing the Soma ceremony. Sacrifice with fire, called yajna, is performed by reciting Vedic mantras. Vedic literature was codified when the Indo-Aryans began to occupy the fertile plains of North India, then made the transition from a pastoral society to an agrarian society, resulting in the need for more organization. Structured start to emerge. The new society involved the residents who had previously settled on the fertile plains. They were assigned to the color system according to the Aryans, with political and religious authority in the hands of the Brahmins and knights. Immature forms of sovereign territory began to emerge, and the most prominent or influential was the Kuru tribal kingdom. The kingdom was a tribal bond, which later developed into a state-level society, the first recorded in South Asian history, around 1000 AD. They overtly transformed the cultural heritage of the previous Vedic period, compiled Vedic hymns into an association, and developed new ceremonies that became prominent in Indian civilization as Shraddha ceremonies, which contributed to classical synthesis, or synthesis. Hindu. The 9th and 8th centuries BC saw the compilation of the oldest Upanishadic books. The Upanishads formed a theoretical basis for classical Hinduism and were known as Vedanta, conclusion from the Vedas. The ancient Upanishadic scriptures counteract the increasing intensity of the ceremonies. The various monistic speculations of the Upanishadic teachings are synthesized into a theistic framework in the Hindu holy book Bhagavad Gita. The term Dharma has been used in Brahmanical philosophies, which are seen as an aspect of Reda. The term Reda is also known in the Proto-Indo-Iranian religion, namely the religion of the Indo-Iranian people before the presence of the Vedic, Indo-Aryan, and Zoroastrianism, Iran, books. Asha Asa is an Avesta term similar to Arta in the Vedas. The Vedas are a library for the upper class, and do not merely express popular ideas or practices. Vedic-based religion in later periods coexisted with local religions, such as Yaksa worship, and it itself was the result of a mixture of Indonesian culture. Arya with Harappa. Reformed ascetic Mahavira and Siddhartha Gautama, Mahavira meaning great hero, 599-527 BC, or Vardhamana, Sanskrit. Vardhamana was born around 599 BC in northeast India, in the same area that Gautama Buddha was born, although a generation earlier. Surprisingly, the lives of these two people share many interesting parallels. Vardhamana was the youngest son of a leader, and like Gautama was raised in luxury. At the age of 30, he turned away from his environment, family, he has a wife and a daughter, left his comfortable environment, and decided to seek spiritual truth and fulfillment. Two prominent figures from the Sramana group, a tradition that does not recognize the authority of Vedic literature. Later on, Mahavira became a major figure in Jainism, while Siddhartha Gautama in Buddhism. Sramana, increased urbanization in India in the 7th and 6th centuries BC has supported the ascetic movement or Sramana, which opposed fanaticism towards various ceremonies. Mahavira, 549-477 BC, leader of Jainism, and Buddha Gautama, 563-483 BC, initiators Buddhist traditions, are prominent figures in the movement. According to Heinrich Zimmer, Jainism and Buddhism are part of the pre-Vedic cultural heritage, which also includes Samkhya and Yoga. Jainism does not originate in Brahmin-Aryan cultural sources, but reflects the cosmology and anthropology of the ancient, pre-Aryan upper-class people who lived in northeastern India, rooting in the same foundations of ancient metaphysical speculation as Yoga, Sankhya, and Buddhism, other Indian teachings that are not based on Vedas. In one part, the Sramana tradition teaches the concept of the cycle of birth and death, cycle of reincarnation, the concept of samsara, and the concept of seeking freedom from that reincarnation, which are characteristic of Hinduism. James B. Pratt in his book The Pilgrimage of Buddhism and a Buddhist Pilgrimage writes that Oldenburg, 1854-1920, Newman, 1865-1915, and Radhakrishnan, 1888-1975, believed that the Buddhist Tripitaka was influenced by the Upanishads, whereas La Vallée Poussin claims the absence of any influence, and other scholars assert that in certain passages the Buddha stated the antithesis directly to the Upanishads. Preclassical Hinduism. In the period from 500 to 200 BC and 300 AD, there was a Hindu synthesis, which absorbed the Sramana and Buddhist influences, and the emergence of the devotional tradition in Brahmanism through Smriti literature. This synthesis arose under the pressure of the development of Buddhism and Jainism. According to Imbrie, several other religious traditions exist side by side with Vedic-based religions. These indigenous religions finally found a place under the auspices of the Vedic religion. When Brahmanism began to lose its prominence and had to compete with Buddhism and Jainism, popular religions had the opportunity to accentuate their teachings. According to Imbrie, Brahmanists seem to be active in expanding their religious development in order to deal with the onslaught of more heterodox sects. At the same time, among the existing indigenous religions, allegiance to the authority of Vedic literature has provided a thin, yet significant, link between the plurality of the existing gods and religious practices. According to Larson, the Brahmins responded with assimilation and consolidation. This is reflected in the Smriti literature which began to be compiled in that period. The Smriti books from the 200 BC 100 AD period declared the authority of the Vedas, so that recognition of the authority of the Vedas became the main criterion for distinguishing Hinduism from heterodox schools that rejected the Vedas. Most of the basic ideas and the practice of classical Hinduism derives from the Smriti literature, which later became the basic inspiration for most Hindus. Two prominent Indian epic literature, the Ramayana and Mahabharata, which belong to the Smriti, compiled over a long period of time during the late BC and early Christian era, contain mythological stories about the leaders and wars of ancient India, and are interspersed with philosophies and teachings. Religion. Later Puranic literature composed of stories about the gods, their interactions with humans, and their battles with the giants. The Bhagavad-Gita book reinforces the successful consolidation of Hinduism, by combining Brahmanic and Sramana ideas into a theistic devotional. In the early Christian era, several schools of Hindu philosophy were formally codified, including Samkhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisesika, Purvamimamsa, and Vedanta. Rama and Krishna are the main worship of the devotional tradition, which is especially expressed in the Bhagavata Purana. The Kresna worship tradition involved several cults based on Naga, Yaksa, hills and trees. Shiva absorbed local cults by adding the words Isa or Iswara to the names of local gods, for example Bhutswara, Hatakeswara, Kanswara. To remind about the symbolization of animals in the original teachings of the archipelago, namely, goose, Kura and Naga. This is shown in the Bhagavata book, which tells about Rama and Kresna, which in this case the author also believes that Ramayana is what happens in the archipelago. Hinduism in India underwent major reforms under the influence of the prominent Guru Ramanuja, as well as Guru Madhva, and Sri Caitanya. Followers of the Bhakti movement shifted from the abstract Brahman concept, advocated by the philosopher Adi Shankara centuries earlier, to a more devotional tradition, zealous for the worship of the more imaginable avatara, especially Kresna and Rama. The Bhagavad book connects color with one's obligations, swadharma, nature, swabhava, and natural inclinations, guna. Based on the understanding of color according to Bhagavad, the Hindu spiritual figure Sri Aurobindo made the doctrine that a person's job should be determined by his talents and natural capacities. There are groupings of different castes. In the original teachings of the archipelago, both Sunda Wiwitan and Bali, there is a symbolization of color. This does not mean that the original teachings of the archipelago have been influenced by the teachings of Indian Hinduism. The author believes that Hinduism in India is derived from the original teachings of the archipelago's ancestors. Mobility and flexibility in color dismiss the notion of social discrimination in the caste system, as some sociologists have argued, although some experts disagree. Experts debate whether the caste system is part of Hinduism governed by scripture, or simply a community custom. Various scholars argue that the caste system was established by the British colonial regime. According to the Hindu spiritual teacher Sri Ramakrishna, 1836–1886. Prayers, Virakarita Mahabharata glorifies japa, worship songs, as the greatest obligation during the Kali Yuga period, present day, 3102 BC to the present. Many schools have adopted japa as their main spiritual practice. Japa in several languages of the Nusantara tribes is something we often know, namely chanting or mantra, which is pronounced as something that has a magical meaning. This is evident in the native utterance of the archipelago, Japa Mantra. A quite popular Indian Hindu spiritual practice is yoga. Yoga is a dharmic teaching that is used to train mindfulness for peace, health and spiritual insight. This is done through a set of exercises and postures to control body and mind. The concept of ahimsa in Hinduism is not as strict as Buddhism and Jainism, because traces of the existence of sacrificial practices can be traced in the Vedic scriptures. For example, mantras for goat sacrifice in Rigveda, horse sacrifice, Aswamedha, in Yajurveda, and sacrifice according to Purusamedha. In Yajurveda, while in the Jyotistoma rite there are 3 animals sacrificed through a ceremony, each of which is called Agnisamaya, Sawaniya, and Anubindya. Yajurveda is considered the Vedic sacrifice and ritual, and mentions several rites of animal sacrifice, for example the mantra and the sacrificial procedure of a white goat to Bayu, a calf to Saraswati, a cow with a knot to Savitar, a bull to Indra, a cow castrated to Varuna, and etc. From here, the social reaction regarding the book of sacrificial procedures, Brahmana, can be traced. According to Panini, there are 2 kinds of Brahmins, namely the Old Brahman and the New Brahman. In the Old Brahmana, such as Aitareya Brahmana for Rigveda, sacrifices are actually done, but in New Brahmins like Shatapatha Brahmana, sacrificial animals are released after being tied to the sacrificial stake. This is a reaction to the revival of the Sramana religions, such as Buddhism and Jainism, which resulted in the laying of the concept of ahimsa among Brahmanic practitioners. Indigenous teachings in the archipelago. The indigenous people of the Indonesian archipelago practice their native religion, a belief that also spreads to the Austronesian race. The original teachings of the archipelago respect and worship God as Hyang. This invisible entity possessing this power is identified by the traditional Javanese and Balinese as Hyang, and by the Dayaks as Sanjang, which can mean divine or ancestor. In modern Indonesian, Hyang tends to be associated with God, especially after the New Order era. In common belief and practice, Asintia is the supreme deity in Balinese religion. A belief in one supreme being called Ida Sang Hyang Widiwasa, Sanghyang Tunggal, or Sanghyang Asintya. God Almighty in the culture of the Toraja tribe of Central Sulawesi is known as Puang Matua, in the Alak-Todolo belief. A belief that all gods are manifestations of that supreme existence. This belief is the same as that of Smartha Sampradaya, which also states that the various forms of deity such as Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva are different aspects of the same supreme being. Lord Shiva is also worshipped in other forms as Bhattara Guru, and Maharaja Dewa, Mahadeva are closely identified with the sun in the local Hindu or Kebatinan form. A belief about Trimurti, which consists of 1. Brahma, as the creator. 2. Vishnu or Vishnu, as the preserver. 3. Siwa or Shiva, as the fuser, Hindu India as the god of destruction. A belief about all other deities, Hyang, Dewata and Batara. The Indonesian government has recognized Hinduism as one of the 6 official monotheistic religions, along with Islam, Protestantism, Catholicism, Buddhism, Hinduism or Confucianism. However, the Indonesian government does not recognize indigenous belief systems as official religions. As a result, followers of various indigenous religions such as the Dayak Kaharingan have identified themselves as Hindu to avoid pressure to convert to Islam or Christianity. Some of the beliefs of indigenous tribes such as Sunda Wiwitan from the Sundanese tribe, Alak-Todolo from the Toraja tribe, and Parmalim from the Batak tribe, although different from Balinese Hinduism which may seek affiliation with Hinduism to survive, while at the same time trying to preserve differences, they are against the mainstream of Indonesian Hinduism which is dominated by the Balinese. Indigenous teachings of the archipelago. Religion in Bali is a religion that is deeply intertwined with art and rituals, and is less strictly regulated by scriptures, laws and beliefs like Islam. Religion in Bali does not have a traditional emphasis on the cycle of rebirth and reincarnation, but is concerned with a myriad of Hyangs, the souls of the ancestors. Like Kebatinan, these deities are thought to be capable of good or harm. People in Bali place great emphasis on dramatic and aesthetic peace rituals for the Hyangs. These rituals are performed at temple and temple sites scattered throughout the village and in the countryside. A place of prayer or temple in Bali is called a pura, and unlike the Hindustani-style mandir towering over the interior spaces, Balinese temples are designed as open-air prayer places within closed walls, connected by a series of intricately decorated gates to reach the open space. Each of these temples has a more or less permanent membership, where every Balinese is part of a temple based on ancestry, residence, or mystical revelation. Some of the temples are also located in family homes, also called banjars. In Bali, others are located in rice fields, and others are located in famous geographical locations, cliffs, mountains, beaches. Balinese religion also includes the religious belief of Taba Ra, a religious cockfighting in which a rooster is used in religious customs by enabling it to fight other roosters in a Balinese religious cockfighting ceremony, a form of animal offering. The bloodshed in Taba Ra is needed as a purification to appease the evil spirits of Buddha and Kala, and to pray for a good harvest. This cockfighting ritual usually takes place outside the temple and also follows ancient and complex rituals as stated in the sacred Lontar manuscripts. The native teachings of the archipelago in Java. Javanese tradition has survived to various degrees and forms in Java. In recent years, the notion of Hinduism as a religion embraced by Javanese society has been taken to be true, especially in areas surrounding a large temple site in Java, such as the Klaten area near Prambanan Temple. Certain indigenous ethnic groups, such as the Tengger and Osing tribes, are also associated with indigenous Javanese religious traditions, which is proof that they are not Indian Hindus. The indigenous teachings of the archipelago in other places on the island of Java, among the non-Balinese people considered to be Hindus by the Indonesian government, for example, are followers of the Dayak religion, Kaharingan in central Kalimantan, where government statistics record the Kaharingan faith as 15.8% of the total population in 1995. Nationally, in the early 1990s, Hindus in Indonesia only represented about 2% of the population. Many people from the Manasala tribe and the Nualu tribe from Seram Island embrace the Norse belief, syncretism with Protestant elements and Christianity. Likewise, the Toraja tribe in Tanah Toraja, Sulawesi has identified their native religion as Hinduism. The Batak tribe in Sumatra has identified their original Parmalim tradition with Hinduism. The Bada belief of the Sasak tribe on Lombok Island as non-Muslim. Their religion is considered to be a blend of Hinduism and Buddhism with animism. This belief is considered to be included in Buddhism by the Indonesian government. Development and recognition. Although many Javanese have retained aspects of their traditional Javanese and indigenous traditions through centuries of Islamic influence under the banner of the Kejawen religion, or also the non-Orthodox Javanese Islam, Abangan, only a small part of Javanese society has it is isolation that has consistently upheld Javanese beliefs as the main mark of their public identity. One of the members of this small indigenous community is the people from remote areas of the Tengger tribe who live in the Tengger Highlands in East Java province. Official recognition. Recognizing one's religion as Hindu was legally impossible in Indonesia until 1962, when Hinduism became the fifth religion to be recognized by the state. This recognition was initially championed by Balinese religious organizations and was given for the sake of Balinese citizens, the majority of whom are followers of a religion that is considered Hindu. The largest of these organizations is Parasada Hindu Dharma Bali, changing its name to Parasada Hindu Dharma Indonesia, PHDI, in 1964, reflecting subsequent attempts to define Hinduism not only as Balinese but also national in interest. Religious identity became a life and death issue for many Indonesians around the same time Hinduism finally gained recognition, when the 1965-1966 Communist massacre took place. People who do not associate themselves with one of the state-recognized religions are likely to be suspected of being communists. Despite the many disadvantages of joining the national minority religion, deep concern for the preservation of their traditional ancestral religion has led some ethnic groups outside the island to make Hinduism a more viable option, suitable other than Islam. In the early 1970s, Torajan tribesmen from Sulawesi were the first to realize this opportunity by seeking refuge for the religion of their native ancestors under the large Indonesian Hindu umbrella, followed by the Karo from Sumatra in 1977. In central and south Kalimantan, a large Hindu movement has developed among the local indigenous Dayak population, leading to a mass declaration of Hindu on the island in 1980. However, the conversion to Hindu followed clear ethnic divisions. Indigenous Dayak customs deal with a predominantly government-sponsored, mainly Muslim, migrant population, and are very hostile to the expropriation of their ancestors' land and natural resources. Compared to their Javanese Hindu counterparts, many indigenous Dayak tribal leaders are also more concerned about Parasada Hindu Dharma Bali's efforts to standardize Hindu ritual practices nationally, fearing this will result in diminishing their own unique Kaharingan traditions and cultural domination. Foreigners that are getting longer. On the other hand, most Javanese were slow to consider Hinduism at the time, lacking a clear organization of ethnicity for religion for fear of reprisals from locally strong Javanese Islamic organizations such as Nahdlatul Ulama (NU). The youth wing of NU has been active, not only for suspected communists but also for Kejawen, or anti-Islam, elements in Sukarno's Indonesian Nationalist Party (PNI) during the early phases of the bloody communist massacre of 1965-1966. So that practitioners of the Kejawen mystical tradition feel compelled to declare themselves Muslim because of concerns for their safety. In the New Order era, the Kejawen practitioners' considerations of abandoning their traditions in order to survive in an Islamic country were soon proven incorrect. President Sukarno's successor, Suharto, adopted a clear non-sectarian, non-religious approach in what he called the New Order era. But their old fears resurfaced when Suharto officially embraced Islam in the 1990s. Initially, Suharto was a strong defender of the values of the Kejawen tradition, but Suharto began making offers to Muslims at that time, due to shaky public and military support for his government. A strong signal to this is the authorization and personal support of the Indonesian Muslim Intellectuals Association, ICMI, a new organization whose members are openly promoting the Islamization of the Indonesian state and society. Their concerns grew as ICMI became the dominant civilian faction in Indonesia's national bureaucracy, and initiated massive Islamic and mosque education programs through the Ministry of Religion, again targeting the strongholds of the Kejuan tradition. Around the same time, there were a series of killings by Muslim extremist mobs of people suspected of practicing traditional Javanese healing methods by magic. In terms of political affiliation, most contemporary Kejuan practitioners and new Hindus have become members of the old PNI, then joined the new nationalist party Megawati Soekarnoputri, daughter of Soekarno. That is the author's explanation of the original teachings of the archipelago, which spread to India and became the basis for the philosophy of Hinduism that developed in India. We will return to the Borobudur temple. Establishment of Borobudur. Previous civilizations in the Sunda land have existed, and this civilization developed in the southern part of the mainland of the earth, which is called Lemuria. This civilization centered in Sunda land spreads teachings guided by the wisdom of the sun, spreading to the Middle East, the plains of Asia, China and Latin America. This civilization named Lemuria is estimated to have existed in the year 53,000 BC. Borobudur at this time in its plain state did not have a stupa of statues and reliefs as seen today. It should also be noted that the Padang and Suku temples and the temples whose basic form Pundan Barandik were built at this time. Mount Padang in West Java, which is estimated to have started construction 23,000 BC Chanjar, relics of the megalithic age, are considered to be the oldest civilizations in the world that have ever existed, based on carbon testing, carbon dating. Borobudur during the civilization of Atlantis around 24,000 BC and 23,000 BC based on Plato's records. Already standing majestically, this building is a landmark or symbol of greatness and prestige of a civilization, nation in its day. In the range before 5000 BC, this civilization experienced a period of heyday and war with civilizations that were on the Indian mainland around the Indus River. This civilization, known as the Harapa Civilization, with the center of the Mohenjo-Daro government. This all-powerful war incident was recorded in the story, Ramayana records with the year 5000 BC. The Indus Valley Civilization, 3300-1700 BC, 2600-1900 BC, was an ancient river civilization that flourished in the Indus River basin in ancient India, now Pakistan and northwest India. This civilization is also known as the Harappan Civilization. In ancient times, Mohenjo-Daro was one of the administrative centers of the ancient Indus Valley Civilization. At the height of its heyday, Mohenjo-Daro was the most developed city in South Asia. Its planning and engineering demonstrated the city's importance to the Indus Valley people. Indus culture developed over the centuries, then experienced a revival around 3000 BC. This civilization reached areas that are now occupied by Pakistan and North India, but suddenly experienced a decline around 1900 BC. It was during this period that the destruction of the Harappa civilization was under attack by an advanced civilization at that time. Deutero Malayu migration. According to the Wangsakerta script, after thousands of years, the Proto-Malayu people inhabited the archipelago. Around 300 BC, came the immigrant nation, which was later known as Deutero Malayu. Deutero Malayu migration theory, apparently not from Western Dutch historians, such as N.J. Crom, Eugene Dubois, J.G. de Casparis and so on, but from an archipelago historian named Pangeran Wangsakerta, who is thought to have lived in the middle of the 17th century AD. Through the Wangsakerta manuscript, he described the lineage of Akitaium, Salakonagara elders in the 1st century AD, as follows. Akitaium son of Kisrenga son of Nyaisarati Warawiri daughter of Aki Bahulpakal son of Aki Dunkul son of Ki Pawang Sar son Daduk Pawang Marga son of Ki Bagang son Daduk Wailing son Daduk Banda son of Nesan. Furthermore, he wrote, Akitaium's ancestor, Aki Bahulpakal, lived in South Swarnabhumi, Sumatra, then Daduk Pawang Marga lived in North Swarnabhumi and Daduk Banda lived in Langkasunka. From the genealogy search above, it is clear that the migration path of the Deutero Malay people started from Indian land, then entered the archipelago via Swarnabhumi, Sumatra, and then headed to the island of Java. Source: Anthropological Theory of Deutero Malayu Migration, found Panambahan Topati, archipelago historians in the 17th century AD. The diversity of the ancestors of the people of the archipelago is further enriched by the presence of the descendants of Prophet Ibrahim as, from the Pallawa dynasty known as Dewawarman to, source, genealogy dynasty Majapahit. Later, Dewawarman I became the ruler of Salakonagara, and married Akitaium's son, Pahachi Larasati. The following is the pedigree of Raden Wijaya, founder of Majapahit, Raden Wijaya bin, Rakian Jayadharma bin, King Guru Dharmasiksa bin, Dharma Kusuma bin, Rakian Jayajiri bin, Lalong Bhumi bin, Dharmaraja bin. Kahuripan daughter, Binti, Dharmawangsa Tega bin, Sri Makuta Wangsa Wardana bin, Sri Ishana Tungawijaya bin, Mpu Sindak bin, son of Mpu Daksa bin, Mpu Daksha bin, Rakai Waduhumalong bin, Pramoda Wardani binti. Samaratunga bin, Samaragwira bin, Rakai Panangkaran bin, Sanjaya bin, Brata Sanawa bin, Prabhu Galatu bin, Redikandayan bin, Suryawarman great-grandson bin, Suryawarman's grandson bin, Suryawarman's daughter binti. Suryawarman bin, Kandrawarman bin, Indrawarman bin, Wizanuwarman bin, Purnawarman bin, Dharmayawarman bin, Dui Minawati, her husband Dui Minawati, named Jayasingawarman, founder of the Tarumanagara kingdom, bint, Svatakarnawa Warmandui bint, Dewawarman 7 bin, Dewawarman 6 bin, Mahisasura Mardini Warmandui bint, Dui Tirta Lenkara bint, Dewawarman 3 bin, Dewawarman 2 bin. Dewawarman 1, married to daughter Pahachi Larasati bint Akitaium bin Kisrenga bin Nyai Sarati Warawiri bint Sangaki Bahulpakal bin Aki Dunkul bin Ki Pawang Sar bin Daduk Pawang Clan bin Ki Bagang bin Daduk Wailing bin Daduk Banda bin Nesan. Based on historical research, the founder of the Salakonagara kingdom, Dewawarman I, who was the ancestor of the Majapahit king, came from the Pallava dynasty. He came to Java Dwipa, Java Island, around the 1st century AD and ruled the Salakonagara kingdom with his wife, Pahachi Larasati in 130-168 AD. Description of Sulayman in Nusantara Island. Prophet Sulayman, the ancestor of the Malay nation in genealogy King Khosrau I of Persia, 531-578. This is Susur Galor Bithitram Saya, Sang Superba, a descendant of Iskandar Zulkarnain who came down from Siguntang Mahameru Hill Palembang. Our origins are from the grandchildren of King Iskandar Zulkarnain, our Nizab is from Raja Nusirwan, Raja Masirik and Maghrib, and our transmits from Sulayman alayhi salam. Sejarah, History of Malay, BC, written by Abdulkadir Munshi, verse 2.2. Bithitram Saya, Sang Superba, is said to have married Wan Sendari, the son of Damong Libar Dan, the ruler of Palembang, the grandson of Raja Sulan, a descendant of Raja Nusirwan Adil bin Kibid Sharair. Later his descendants became the forerunners of kings in Malay. Bithitram Saya, Sang Superba, known in history as the 13th century Sriwijaya king, named Sri Tri Bawana, who founded the Karatang kingdom, Indragiri, and the Kandi's kingdom in Kuantan. One of the sons of Sang Superba, named Sang Nila Utama, founded the Tumasik kingdom, which is now known as Singapore. Lineage of the Malay nation. Ibn Abd al-Rabi in his work Al-Iqd al-Farid, which is quoted by Azumardi Azra in his book The Middle East and Archipelago Network of 17 and 18 Ages, mentions the existence of a correspondence between the king of Sriwijaya, Sri Indravarman, and the Caliph Umar bin Abdul Aziz. In around the year 100 8th century AD, the king of Sriwijaya sent a letter which contained the following. From the Raja of Raja Malik al-Amlik, who was the descendant of 1,000 kings, whose wife is also the grandson of 1,000 kings, in which the animal enclosures are 1,000 elephants. In its territory there are 2 rivers which irrigate the agarwood trees, the aromatic spices, nutmeg and camphor which smell good up to a distance of 12 miles, to the king of Arabia who did not associate other gods with Allah. I have sent you a gift, which is not really a very large gift, but a token of friendship. I want you to send me someone who can teach me Islam and explain to me its laws. Is it true that the king of Srivijaya was the descendant of 1,000 kings? Is it true that the king of Srivijaya was the descendant of Iskandar Zulkarnain and Prophet Sulayman? Who is meant by Raja Nusirwan Adil, Raja Masirik East, and Maghrib West, as found in Malay history? Based on the history of Malay, As previously described, information was obtained that Salasila Damang Libar Don and Sang Superba met King Nusirwan Adil. Among historians, estimates that King Nusirwan Adil is identical to King Anushirvan the Just of Persia, ruled 531 to 578 AD. In the Persian Empire Sassanid dynasty, he was the son of Kavad I of Persia, or in Malay history called King Kebid Shahryar. Through the search for genealogy, the King Anushirvan lineage was obtained. Khosrau I of Persia, with the following details. 1. Trace galore from Cyrus II, the Great, of Persia, Zulkarnain. Maharaja. Nusirwan Adil Anushirvan, King Khosrau I, the Just, of Persia, bin Maharaja Kebid Shahryar, Kavad I of Persia, bin Firuz II of Persia bin Yazdegerd II of Persia bin Bahram V of Persia bin Yazdegerd I of Persia bin Shapur III of Persia bin Shapur II, the Great, of Persia bin Ifra Hormuz bin Vasudeva of Kabul bin Vasudeva IV of Kandahar bin Vasudeva III of Kushans bin Vasudeva II of Kushans bin Kaniska III of Kushans bin Vasudeva I of Kushans bin Huvashkai of Kushans bin Kaniska of Kushanistan bin Wemakadphizes II of Kunhanas bin Princess of Bactria bin Calliope of Bactria bin Hippostratus of Bactria bin Strato I of Bactria bin Agathoclea of Bactriae bin Agathocles I of Bactriae bin Pantaleon of Bactria bin Sundari Moria of Magadai, married to Demetrii of Magadios I. A descendant of King Iskander, Alexander III, the Great, of Macedonia, bint Princess of Avanti, married Bria. Sundari Moria of Magadha, married Demetrios I of Bactriae, descendant of King Iskander, Alexander III, the Great, of Macedonia, bint Princess of Avanti, married Brihadratna Moria of Magadha. Descendant of King Ashoka, bint Inhisara IV of Avanti bin Inhisara III of Penkanada bin Inhisara II of Taxila bin Inhisara I of Taxila bin Rodogun Achaemenid of Persia bint Artaxerxes II of Persia bin Darius II of Persia bin Artaxerxes I of Persia bin Xerxes I the Great, of Persia bin Atasa of Persia, married to Darius I of Pesia, a descendant of the children of Israel, bint Cyrus II, the Great, of Persia. 2. Susur Galor from Alexander III of Macedonia, King Iskander Zulkarnain. Demetrios I of Bactriae bin Berenike of Bactria bint Princess of Syria bint Laotis I of Syria bin Esopia the Pertixid of Macedonia bint Alexander III, the Great of Macedonia. 3. Follow the line from King Ashoka. Brihadratna Moria of Magadha bin Dasaratha of Magadha bin Kunala of Taxila bin King Ashoka, Asoka, Vardhana. 4. Follow the lines of Prophet Solomon. Darius I of Persia bin Meshar bin Salathiel bin Tamar binti Johanan bin Hosias bin Ammon bin Manassas bin Izchias bin Achaz bin Jotham bin Uzziah bin Amaziah bin Joash bin Ozias bin Jehoram bin Jehoshaphat bin Asa bin Abiah bin Roboam bin Prophet Suleiman. What the king of Srivijaya, Sri Indravarman, admits, as a descendant of 1,000 kings, turns out to be not a figment but a fact, through Susur Galor his ancestor, Maharaja Nusirwan Adil, has proved it. And through searching genealogy too, we can see that King Iskander Zulkarnain, Alexander III of Macedonia, Zulkarnain, Cyrus II of Persia, and Prophet Suleiman as the ancestor of the Malay nation, are a reality and not just wishful thinking. In the discussion of this book there are questions as to what and why Solomon's descendants are in the archipelago. The right answer is because Solomon's conquest of Queen Saba in the archipelago, Queen Amuhia, wife of Nebuchadnezzar II, is the daughter of Nusantara. We often find research results from historians, which tell stories about the ancestors of the archipelago. Some estimate that they come from India, China, Central Asia and so on. Did you know that if the nations of the world are likely to have Javanese, Malay, blood through genealogy search, this historical fact can be proven? This story begins in an event around 600 BC, when Nebuchadnezzar II, king of Babylon, sent several expeditions to the east, with the aim of taking large trees and selected flower seeds, to be planted in Babylon's hanging gardens. This hanging garden initiative was carried out in an effort to treat Empress Amuhia's longing for the atmosphere of her hometown. Source: Altar Terazia Bangsa Malayu 5. Historians note, Queen Amuhia, 630 to 565 BC, belongs to the King Cyaxares of the Medes, 690 to 585 BC. Taking into account the age gap between the two, around 60 years, it is strongly suspected that Queen Amunia is the grandson of King Cyaxares. The father of Queen Amunia was a prince of the Medes, who was also the brother of King Astyages of the Medes 660 to 550 BC. To understand, the Medes region is in the area around Persia, Iran, whose natural state is more or less similar to Babylon, Iraq. So it is very surprising that the opinion stated, Queen Amunia missed the atmosphere in Medes, especially because the location is not far from Babylon. The location of Queen Amunia's hometown is still full of mystery. Some historians suspect that the hometown in question is none other than the land of Java, Nusantara, which is far away and is full of trees and various flowers. So why is there a princess from Medes, can live in Java, Nusantara? Could it be that Queen Amunia's mother is a princess from a Malay country? The answer is, because Queen Amunia, a Midas of Media, since childhood, has been familiar with the tropical atmosphere in a fertile country, in her mother's hometown. Professor Giorgio Bucalati, a senior archaeologist from the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, who at that time was amazed by a discovery. He found a sunken porcelain, on which were the fossil remains of the clove plant. Bucalati was doing excavations on the land of the former house of a merchant dating from 1700 BC in Terca, Middle Euphrates. As an expert, Bucalati knows that cloves can only live in one place on Earth, namely in the archipelago, Maluku Islands. This finding then emerged the term clove root or the clove spice trade route of the archipelago to the Pharaoh of Egypt. These findings prove to us that in BC, in the days of the prophets, the sailors of the archipelago had crossed the oceans and established relationships with other citizens of the world. Even Dick Reed believes that the shipping system, including the boats, of the Nusantarctic sailors is the reference for the systems and forms of boats in many other countries in the world. This belief is shared by a number of archaeologists and senior historians such as Dr. Roland Oliver. Source: Indonesian ancestors exported cloves, cinnamon and camphor to Pharaoh. An ancient Jewish manuscript tells of the source of the gold provisions for building the city-state of the kingdom of Prophet Solomon as, circa 950 BC, taken from an ancient kingdom in the Far East called Ophir. It is possible that Ophir is on the island of Sumatra, which is known as Golden Island, or in Sanskrit called Colourdwipa, Suvarnadvipa. In fact, according to information, the Minangkabau Kingdom Center is located in the middle of gold mining. The gold produced is then exported from a number of ports, such as Kampar, Indragiri, Pariaman, Tikus, Baras, and Padir. Based on the archaeological data above, in the archipelago around 600 BC, there were trade centers, both on the island of Sumatra to Maluku. It is suspected that Queen Amunia lived in one of these trade centers, to accompany her parents, who were the trade consul of the Medes in the archipelago. Amunia, ancestor of 1,000 kings. The marriage between King Nebuchadnezzar II and Queen Amunia gave birth to a son and 3 daughters. Based on the investigation of genealogy, through the zuriat of one of his grandchildren, named Nidantu Bel, Prince of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar III of Babylon, one-day rulers will be born in both eastern and western countries. Here are the descendants boys who became kings in the archipelago. Maharaja Nusarwan Adil, ancestor of the Malay kings Anushirvan, King Khosrau I, the Just, of Persia bin Maharaja Kebad Shahryar, Kavad I of Persia, bin Firuz II of Persia bin Yazdegerd II of Persia. Bin Bahram V of Persia bin Yazdegerd I of Persia bin Shapur III of Persia bin Shapur II, the Great, of Persia bin Ifra Hormuz bin Vasudeva of Kabul bin Vasudeva IV of Kandahar bin Vasudeva III of Kushans. Bin Vasudeva II of Kushans bin Kaniska III of Kushans bin Vasudeva I of Kushans bin Huvashka I of Kushans bin Kaniska of Kushanistan bin Wemakad Phisas II of Kunhanas bin Princess of Bactria bint Calliope. Of Bactria bint Hippostratus of Bactria bin Strato I of Bactria bin Agathoclea of Bactrii bint Agathocles I of Bactrii of Magadari of Morti Princess of Avanti bint Inhisara IV of Avanti bin Inhisara III of Penkanada bin Inhisara II of Taxila bin Inhisara I of Taxila bin Rodogun Achaemenid of Persia bint Artaxerxes II of Persia bin Darius II of Persia bin Ondia Andrea, of Babylon, married to Artaxerxes I of Persia, bint Nebuchadnezzar IV of Babylon bin Nidantu Bel Prince of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar III of Babylon bin Princess of Babylon bin Queen Amuhia. After the occupation by the Australoid race, the Caucasoid race came to include the Elamo-Dravidians. 4000 BC to 6000 BC and Indo-Aryan 2000 BC to 1500 BC and the Sino-Tibetan Mongoloid migrated to India. The Elamo-Dravidians probably originated from Elam, now Iranian territory. The oldest prehistoric religion in India that may have left its mark on Hinduism dates back to the Mesolithic and Neolithic times. Some of the tribal religions in India still survive, predating the dominance of Hinduism, but it should not be assumed that there are many similarities between prehistoric and modern tribal peoples. According to the anthropologist Gregory Possehl, the Indus River Valley civilization from 2600–1900 BC contained a logical, or perhaps arbitrary, starting point for some aspects of the later Hindu tradition. Religion at that time contained the worship of the Almighty God, which some scholars, especially John Marshall, compared to a proto-Shiva, and perhaps the figure of a mother goddess, underlying the figure of Sakti. Below we will find out that the figure of the mother goddess was a figure worshipped in ancient times by civilization in the land of Java. Dewi Shri was also recorded when the first kingdom in the archipelago was the Kingdom of Salakonagara in the 2nd century AD with the title Ny Pahachi Larasati. Other practices from the Indus River Valley civilization that continued into the Vedic period including worship of water and fire. However, the relationship between the gods and religious practices of the Indus River Valley and contemporary Hinduism has been the subject of political disputes and scholarly debate. The oldest book among the Vedic literature is the Rigveda, which is thought to have been composed in the period 1700–1100 BC. Vedic literature focuses on worshipping gods such as Indra, Varuna, and Agni, as well as performing the Soma ceremony. The sacrifice by fire, which is called a yajna, is performed by reciting Vedic mantras. Also below, I will discuss Hinduism from its inception until now, also to Indonesia, which until now Hinduism is a religion that was considered and published by our ancestors, even though it was not and was not. Hinduism in India is completely different from the religion that is said to be Hinduism which is embraced by our society. Pre-Vedic period. Witzel puts a time span between 1900 and 1400 BC. Flood mentions 1500 BC. From the records of the historians above, we can conclude that religion and the things that make up the religion, namely Hinduism, come from other areas. There are some that underlie their pre-Hindu beliefs, namely the worship of the water god, Varuna, the god of fire, Agni, and senses, wind. In the area of Java, especially West Java, the ancestors of the area are very strong in their belief in respect for water, fire, wind, plus one more element, namely Bhumi. What is the main key is the figure of Mother Dewi. Later below I will reveal that belief in the god Varuna, Agni and the figure of Mother Dewi is the religion and belief of this nation, namely the nation during the heyday of the Saba civilization, namely in the discussion of the original religion of our ancestors. Is still recorded in the Sundanese Wiwitan religion, to prove that the religion on the island of the Sunda land called Meru is the beginning of civilization that made the forerunner to the religion called Hinduism in India. The reader's attention is taken a little bit because I explain Indian civilization in the pre-Hindu era. But the explanation has been understood that the religion of the Indians before Hinduism was the religion of the country of Sabah on the big island of Sunda land, which at that time the Europeans said Meru. As a reminder of when the above incident was and was at the time of the prophet, what was the incident under the author, mention the year it occurred. Prophet Adam 5872–4942 BC, Data Wiki. Prophet Idris 4533–4188 BC, Babel, Iraq. Prophet Noah 3993–3043 BC, southern modern Iraq. The Mahabharata epic occurred 3000. The Great Sphinx and Pyramid of Giza from ancient Egypt, built around 2500 BC. The second migration of the Proto-Malay people took place in 2500 BC on the island of Borneo. Prophet Hud 2450–2320 BC, East Hadramaut, Yemen. Prophet David 1010–970 BC, Israel. Prophet Suleiman 975–935 BC, Baitul Maqdis, Palestine. The great and magnificent kingdom in the Middle East is the Kingdom of Solomon. After the death of David the father, Solomon reigned and became king for the nation of Israel. In the written historical record that the life of Solomon was in 975 to 935 BC, it is recorded in history in the world. In the preparation of this book, the author finds a story about the end of Solomon's life. Namely, he went to a place of exile and died. The information about his death was not available in a place and when. The author concludes that Solomon died not in 935 BC, but died after meeting the Queen of Saba, namely Bilqis in Java. Solomon's encounter and meeting with Queen Bilqis in the land of Java began with the incident of a jinn named Boda, a jinn creature follower of Queen Saba, as follows. The story of Prophet Suleiman as with jinn Ifrit, the origin of the cause of meeting Solomon with Queen Saba. During the reign of Prophet Suleiman, all animals, Satanists and jinn were under the rule of Prophet Solomon's kingdom. This story is among the stories that occurred during the reign of the Prophet Allah Solomon. Because the king is highly respected, humankind, animals and jinn want to serve him. One day the jinn Ifrit had come out of the Baitul Maqdis palace because he wanted to find a very beautiful pearl to be gifted to Prophet Solomon so that he would get praise from Prophet Solomon, and at the same time want to prove to the jinn and other devils that he was the genie that was loved most by Prophet Solomon. Slowly the Ifrit jinn came out so that it would not be noticed by other creatures. After arriving at the Red Sea, the Ifrit jinn dived to the bottom of the ocean to find the pearl. After being satisfied with diving, the Ifrit jinn also did not find the pearl, so that he arrived at a rocky place. He could see the sparkle of the rock crevices. After observing it, it turned out that the sparkle was the very beautiful pearl he had been looking for. The Ifrit jinn continued to take the pearl and swim to the surface so that it reached the shore. During the return trip, the Ifrit jinn did not know that he had been followed by another genie named Boda. Boda continues to chase the Ifrit jinn and steal the pearls. The Ifrit jinn was very angry and then chased after Boda. Because of that, Boda ran and flew quickly to the south, causing the Ifrit jinn to not catch up with him anymore. The Ifrit genie was very afraid that the king of jinn knew that the pearl had been lost. Not long after, the Ifrit jinn heard a voice calling him. Ifrit recognizes that the voice is the voice of King Jinn. Immediately Ifrit went to face the king of jinn. The king of jinn asked the Ifrit, "Where are the pearls?" Ifrit replied, "The pearl has been seized by Boda." The king of jinn took the decision to present the gift to Prophet Solomon. After arriving in the presence of Prophet Solomon, the king asked the king of jinn, "What is the fault of the Ifrit?" The king of the genies replied, "Ifrit has lost a very beautiful pearl." Prophet Suleiman said to Ifrit, "Have you hidden the pearl?" Ifrit tells what really happened. Prophet Suleiman said, "I will summon all the jinn and shaitan to be examined. Meanwhile, you will be imprisoned first so that you will be proven innocent," said Prophet Solomon. One of those who heard the conversation was the prime minister, named Asif. He is a wise man and knows that Boda is a servant to someone else. He said to Prophet Suleiman, "Allah made the event as a pioneer for Prophet Solomon to go south to fight in the way of Allah as the king promised before. Maybe the king is still worshipping other than Allah," continued the prime minister. Prophet Solomon accepted these words and the king departed. Christian scriptures mention the Queen of the South, Greek, Basilissa Notu, Latin, Regina Austri, who came from the ends of the earth to hear Solomon's wisdom. Matt. 00:42, Luke 11:31. According to the Gospels of Matthew 00:42 and Luke 11:31, the Queen of the South is claimed to be the Queen of Ethiopia. In the New Testament, she was the woman whom Jesus predicted would rise and curse the unbelievers. The Queen of the South will rise to judgment with this generation and punish her too, because she came from the ends of the earth to hear Solomon's wisdom, and is now one of the more than Solomon is here. Matthew 00:42, Luke 11:31. Apart from everything about the above scriptures, there is a similarity in the direction of the location where Saba is located, south. We can assume about south by saying south from Solomon's palace. Is that how close Saba's palace is to Solomon's palace? No. The palace of Saba is far from Solomon's palace, not in Yemen. The understanding of the distance must be related to crossing the sea, we can capture a distant understanding of some biblical texts or a written understanding of the location of the Saba by paying attention to some similarities in understanding. Namely, for several sources that record and interpret the location of the Saba by comparing something that is not the same, and we can understand something far away with an image that the note-taker does not understand. Let us look at the text quote below. Sheba is also seen in the appearance of the Boccaccio woman, Latin, De mulieribus claris, and Josephus in summoning the Queen of Sheba, Nicola. Boccaccio goes on to explain that not only was she Queen of Ethiopia and Egypt, but also Queen of Arabia. He is also associated with having a magnificent palace on a very large island, called Meroe, which lies near where the Nile is, practically on the other side of the world. From there Nicola crossed the Arabian desert, through Ethiopia and Egypt and up to the coast of the Red Sea, to come to Jerusalem to see the great King Solomon. Notice the text, a very great island, and practically on the other side of the world. Coming from the ends of the earth, Luke 11:31, which is even more powerful as the mention of the name they call Meroe, an expression of ignorance of the location, seen from texts on the other side of the world. The description of a large location is known by many people because it involves something large. The island, and the name of the island is definitely known to the public, namely, Meroe. In the online literature on Wikipedia for Meroe it is written with the text Meru, is a mountain of Sanskrit written with Sumeru, which means, Meru Aging, is the holy mountain in the three beliefs of Hindu Buddhism and Jainism in mainland India, is considered the cosmological center of the universe, both physically and metaphysically spiritual. Mount Meru is the dwelling place of the gods, especially Lord Brahma. In the Suryasiddhanta book, it is stated that Mount Meru is located in the middle of the world, in the land of Jambunada, Jambudvipa. We already know that the mention of Jambudvipa as one of the islands which, according to mythology, is on the island where the son of Priyabrata lives, named Agnidra, written in the Bhagavata Purana. Suryasiddhanta book is a book of astronomy found in India. In this book there are regulations that explain the movement of celestial bodies according to their original location in the universe. This book is not known who the author was and when this book was first compiled. Several books that discuss mathematics and astronomy refer to this text, while translations in Arabic and Latin later influenced science in the Middle East and Europe. There are allegations that this book was the book that was sent down to the prophet, which was not included in the 25 prophets, but was in the name of the prophet, which was 313 people the name of the prophet. The author concludes that the big island is Sunda land, is it? Meroe is the name of a world-famous place at that time which is currently called Java Island, where in Javanese stories and stories recorded by Indian bikes about Meroe, as its center the gods in the original culture of Javanese civilization who at that time experienced their glory in the Saba civilization. We will prove about the word Meroe in Javanese civilization and recorded by the Indians, before we go into the explanation of the two figures of Queen Saba and Solomon. Tantu Performance. Tantu Pagalaran or Tangtu Pangalaran is an ancient Javanese book in Kawi language which is about an oral story written about the origin of the island of Java. The story about Meroe in the land of Java. In this book, Batara Guru, Shiva, ordered the gods Brahma and Vishnu to fill the island of Java with humans. Because the island of Java at that time was still floating in the vast ocean, bobbing, and constantly shaking, the gods decided to nail the island of Java by moving Mount Mahameru to the top of Java. Lord Vishnu transformed into a giant tortoise carrying the mountain on his back, while Lord Brahma transformed into a giant dragon snake that twisted his body on the mountain and the turtle's body so that the mountain could be transported safely. The gods placed the mountain on the first part of the island they encountered, which is the western part of the island of Java. But the weight of the mountain caused the eastern tip of the island to lift up. Then they moved it to the eastern part of the island of Java. When Mount Meru was brought to the east, the scattered mountain pieces created a mountain range on the island of Java that stretched from west to east. However, when the peak of Meru was moved to the east, the island of Java was still tilted, so the gods decided to cut off part of the mountain and place it in the northwest. These fragments formed Mount Paatra, which is now known as Mount Penanggangan, and the main part of Mount Meru, where Lord Shiva resides, now known as Mount Semeru. When Sang Hyang Shiva came to Java, he he saw many Jawa trees, so that the island was called Java. Wisnu then became the first king to rule on the island of Java under the name Kandiawan. It governs government, society and religion. The geographical environment of the islands of Java and Bali, which are mountainous, is in accordance with the original mythology of the people of the island of Java regarding the belief in Mount Meru or Mahameru, which is considered as the dwelling place of the gods and as a means of connecting between earth, humans, and heaven. Until now, many Javanese and Balinese people still regard the mountain as the residence of the gods, Hyangs, and spirits. In addition, the legend that says the island of Java is sometimes shaken is considered a traditional way of explaining the earthquake phenomenon. The Mahameru text in India in the above note is not a description of India which has already embraced Hinduism, it is a description of civilization that existed before Hinduism, namely civilizations that believe originated from the land of Java. To support the author's analysis of the ancient Indian civilization as a civilization originating from a great imperial civilization, namely the civilization that worships the sun god Agni and the figures of Mother Goddess and Shiva, is the civilization of Saba in Java, in the time before Hinduism developed. Let's look at history. Indian civilization, on the mainland there. The first human race to occupy India is known to have existed around 40,000 to 60,000 years ago, when the Paleolithic period was an Australoid which may have had a relationship with the indigenous peoples of Australia. There are allegations that the race is either close to extinction or is being pushed back by the next wave of migration. We return to the story of the jinn, the Ifrit who took the pearl from the bottom of the sea to be given to his lord Solomon. In the middle of the way the jinn also took it, his name was Boda. This is a power struggle between the two genii, the Ifrit and the Boda. The pearl has been seized from the Ifrit and brought by Boda to the south. Boda also has a lord whose pearl will be given to his master, who is his master. Remember the explanation of the story above about the genies who inhabit tropical islands. Jinn Boda is a genie who is in power and has an employer on the Pulau Besar Sunda land named Meroe. The king is the one who has great power and has an advanced civilization who collaborates with jinn. Even controls jinn, namely the Saba civilization which was in the south, across the vast sea south from the Kingdom of Solomon. On the advice of someone who had a book named Ashif bin Barkia about sophistication and progress at that time, Solomon was advised to go south to straighten out the false worship of the sun. Boda. In Javanese mythology and other tribes, especially those who are still isolating themselves, call Budo, a frightening spooky creature. From here it is clear that Solomon's palace is in Yemen and the palace of Saba is in the south on a large island called Meroe. In the following explanation we will find out the origin of Saba and its genealogy. It is true that the origin of Saba is from the Middle East, which when the kingdom in Java was drowned, the Europeans called it Atlantis, the Lost Empire. And what made Solomon go to the island was because the two jinn who fought for Mutiara. Because of that incident, the two great world figures who had the greatest power on earth met and competed for strength and technological progress. What impressed the author the most was the ability to walk beyond the path of ordinary people. It could be called flying by the two figures. Let's go into the explanation of who the Queen of Saba is, who is her origin. Before the author explains this, we should quote from several explanations of the book about Saba. Agata version of Saba. The Talmud Bava Batra 15b asserts that it was not women but the king of Sheba, based on various interpretations of the Hebrew Mlkt, who came to Jerusalem, clearly intended to discredit the existing story about the relationship between Solomon and the queen. The most complex of the queen's visit to Solomon is given in the 8th century. Is it true? Sheni Targum to Esther. An info tells Solomon that the kingdom of Sheba is the only kingdom on earth did not submit to him, and that the queen who was a worshipper of the sun, he then sent it to Kidder in the land of Sheba with a letter. Sent the bird ordered the queen to come to him as people surrendered. He then had him all the ocean liners loaded with precious gifts and 6,000 youths of the same size, all born at the same hour and wearing purple clothing. They carried a letter stating that he would be able to arrive in Jerusalem in 3 years, although the trip usually took 7 years. When the queen arrived and came to Solomon's palace, thinking that the glass floor was a pool of water, she lifted the hem of her dress, revealing her legs. Solomon informed her of her mistake and admonished her for her hairy legs. He asked 3. Targ Sheni to Esther 1. 3. Or, according to Midrash 1, another riddle to test his wisdom, Proverbs E6 Yaki, section 1085, Midrash Ha-Hefaz. Closing square bracket. In the Kabbalah, the Queen of Sheba is considered one of the queens of demons and is sometimes identified with Lilith, first in the Targum of Job 15, and then in the Zohar and subsequent literature. A Jewish and Arabic myth states that the queen is actually a genie, half human and half demon. In Islam, she is a wise queen, a democratic queen who seeks the truth, finds with Solomon, leaves worship of the sun and replaces her with belief in one God. In the chapter of the Quran, Qs and Namel, birds submit to King Solomon's rule, informing the king about the rich and prosperous land of Saba, Arabic for Sheba, whose queen and people worship the sun instead of God. From the text information above that describes Saba, it can be concluded from the similarity of views that exist in the text, namely that the Queen of Saba is a woman, a sun worshipper. Saba has a large kingdom, and most likely does not come from human descent. What kind? In the previous explanation, the author has explained about pra-Adam's creatures, namely Ajajal, Banyal Jan and Banyal Ban. The author here assumes that one of these creatures is still there and remains on earth, and one of them is the predecessor of Queen Saba. We can understand this from the knowledge obtained by the Saba civilization, which can overcome the distance traveled. In the Al-Quran it does not clearly state the ability of the Queen of Saba to shorten the travel distance, it is only mentioned as follows. Saba. Behold, I met a woman who ruled them, and she was endowed with everything and had a great throne. I found him and his people worshipping the sun, besides Allah, and Satan has made them look beautiful on their deeds and then hinder them from the path, Allah, so that they cannot be guided, so that they do not worship Allah who brings out what is hidden in the sky and on the earth and who knows what you are hiding and what that you declare. And we made between them and between the countries which we bestowed upon him, several lands which were close together, and we established between the countries distances, the journey. Walk you through the cities by night and by day safely. So they said, O Lord, we distance our journey, and they persecute themselves, so we made them talk and we destroyed them to the utmost destruction. In fact, in that there are signs of Allah's power for everyone who is patient and grateful. Worshipping the sun is the main point of similarity according to several books. Regarding the journey of the Queen of Saba there are also similarities, even though the way of expression is different from each version, all of which is the basis that the Queen of Saba can overcome the distance traveled in a short distance. Note the bold text below. He then had him all the ocean liners loaded with precious gifts and 6,000 youths of the same size, all born at the same hour and wearing purple clothing. They carried a letter stating that he would be able to arrive in Jerusalem in 3 years, although the trip usually took 7 years. The journey of the Queen of Saba is 3 years from an ordinary person who travels for 7 years. For Solomon it is clearly illustrated in the journey overcoming the distance, namely, morning and afternoon travel is 2 months for ordinary people, as the quote below. And we subjected the winds to Solomon, whose journey in the morning was the same as a month's journey and his journey in the afternoon was the same as a month's journey, and we flowed the liquid of copper for him. And some of the jinn are working in front of him under his control with the permission of his Lord. And who among them deviates from our commandments, we taste to him the punishment of hell whose flames are burning. Then we subject to him the wind that blows well according to wherever he wants. Sad. 36. Here it is clear that each character has the advantage of being able to overcome distance and time. See the scene of a flying human figure on the reliefs of Borobudur, whether it is a picture of Queen Saba and her troops who brought gifts in the form of gold from a large island called Meroe or Ophir in Christian books to Solomon's palace. Also note the water and fish at the base of the woman's foot relief, as it depicts the glass floor of Solomon's palace. This is also recorded in other books. When the queen arrived and came to Solomon's palace, thinking that the glass floor was a pool of water, she lifted the hem of her dress, revealing her legs. Solomon informed her of her mistake and admonished her for her hairy legs. He asked 3. Targ Sheni to Esther 1:3. Or, according to Midrash 1, another riddle to test his wisdom, Proverbs E6 Yaki, 1085, Midrash Ha-Hefaz. This version of the story is written in the general historical records of Saba, starting from the early kingdom in Yemen, the kingdom of Pra-Saba. 1200-650 BC has been established a kingdom that initiated power in the area, namely the Kingdom of Maan and the Kingdom of Qutban. The people of Yemen came from the Banu Qathan clan who were the descendants of Yarub bin Qathan. These Banu Qathan came from the Mesopotamia region. The Maan kingdom located in North Yemen with its capital city Karna, Karnawu or Karna. The word Maan comes from several languages, namely in English it is called Minya, Arabic al-Mayaniyun or Mayan, Minya or pronounced Maan which means, eye of water. Also found in the Bible are called Maan, Mian or Mian. The city of Maan was formerly called Karna which was the capital of the Maan kingdom. The city of Maan is located south of Al-Jaf, northeast of Sana'a. The religious system of the Maan people, who are not yet familiar with religion, are worshippers of the gods and goddesses who also worship idols. In addition, there are beliefs that worship angels, that they think that angels are sons of God so that it is not wrong to deify them, according to them. Some of them worship jinn, spirits or ghosts. In the discussion of this book, of course there is a connection about the people who worship angels, whose civilization in the time of Saba was also worshipped by angels. In fact it was not the angels they worshipped but the jinn they worshipped. And remember, the day, which at that time Allah gathered them all. Then Allah said to the angel, "Did they worship you?" The angels replied, "Glory be to you. You are our protector." Not them, even they have worshipped the jinn. Most of them believe in the jinn. The Qutban kingdom was founded in South Yemen in about 1000 BC. The Qutban kingdom was established because of the Maan kingdom's political tactics to strengthen its power. If the power of North Yemen was achieved by the Maan kingdom, the territory of South Yemen was also controlled by the Maan kingdom by establishing the Qutban kingdom. The Qutban kingdom was well known for the role of this kingdom which was considered very important because it controlled the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This strait was one of the commercial centers at that time. The strait, which is directly adjacent to Abyssinia, Ethiopia, and the Red Sea, is one of the strategic maritime trade routes. Peak glory to collapse, two kingdoms go side by side. The Maan Empire exerted influence over Egypt, the Arabian Peninsula, Greece and Rome. The next factor that caused the collapse of the Maan kingdom was the emergence of the Kingdom of Sabah in central Yemen, located between the Maan kingdom, North Yemen, and the Qutban kingdom, South Yemen. The Kingdom of Sabah, which began to appear in 950 BC, had a considerable influence on the collapse of this kingdom. The Kingdom of Sabah, which was originally not large compared to the Maan kingdom, gradually became its competitors. The fall of several commercial areas from the Maan kingdom to the hands of the Kingdom of Sabah gradually brought the Maan kingdom to destruction. The Qutban kingdom, which was a child of the Maan kingdom, was finally taken over by the Kingdom of Sabah. This means that the Qutban kingdom was not destroyed like the Maan kingdom but fell under the rule of the Kingdom of Sabah. Some of the remains of the Maan kingdom that remain are the ruins of the cities of Sherwa and Barakizi. There are several inscriptions containing 26 kings who once ruled the Maan kingdom, as well as engraved inscriptions regarding the Maan's communication with the Egyptians, Gaza, Ionia, Sidon, Ammon and Moab Yatrib. The Kingdom of Saba is recorded as having emerged in 950 BC in central Yemen. The Kingdom of Saba, Sheba, was very rich due to the trade in two resins. Frankincense and myrrh only grew in eastern Yemen, southern Oman and Somalia, and were in demand everywhere at that time, not only in temples such as in ancient Egypt and in the Roman Empire but also for daily personal use. Also, the kingdom was very rich because of their agriculture and advanced hydraulic systems. Evidence of the extraordinary engineering skills of the Sabaeans still remains, including the huge dam at Marib, which turns out to be a sandy plain. It is decorated with 3 rows of sphinxes displayed frontally beneath the inscription of consecration of Saba to the god Rama. The problem is that we don't know who is the so-called god Rama, who associated him with the statue of the Sphinx Dan for the Egyptian name, Ramu, or willing, or Raman. The text image above indicates confusion on the range of text obtained in Sphinx. Below we will find an explanation that Ra, the sun god, is a god worshipped by the Saba civilization on the Big Island, Sunda land, whose name is Meroe. We already know that the Saba civilization is still visible in the Wiwitan Sundanese civilization, which they have learned. Isolate yourself from other religions, remember Pa Ra Hyangan. Borobudur book is not a temple. Section 9 continues on to Section 10. Santo Saba works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on subjective academic studies and studies, this needs to be re-examined by experts in their fields. In an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. INDONÄSIARYÄ. By Santo Saba. Exploration and research. Complete info. WhatsApp to +62813 2132 9787.